This week's episode of Bonehead is...
What is this week?
Aloha from Hell.
Is that, oh, geez.
What's that?
Sandman Slim?
Chad got it.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's a Sandman Slim novel. Novels, those are like magazines that have extra pages in them. See, look at all these pages, Joe.
I brought it
Tons
up
of
in
pages
our...
in here. Just tons. And this particular copy there is signed. See, I got it signed right there.
Who'd you get it signed by?
The guy that wrote it, Richard Cadry. Cadry? I don't know. I follow him on Twitter. He's a very nice guy.
Dick Cad. Got it. And this week's episode is about...
Hold on. I want to try something.
Can you still breathe, James?
That is
Funny enough, it's not that he was actually masturbating while you had the pillow up there.
Yeah.
So
Doesn't
anyway,
take that much effort, Joe. It doesn't take that much effort.
God, yeah, I know. Anyway, moving right along. So this week we've Chad sick.
Yep.
Haley's
I'm here.
dead to us, and on top of that, James is in another country.
It's technically just another state of being.
It might as well be another country. But I was so excited to do this episode. I got 3 pages of notes. To the left of me is the movie what? Blazing Saddles.
Oh.
I can't see the poster, but
Yeah.
I didn't know
Oh,
there
you
was
can't
a
see the
movie called
poster?
Blind.
We've had a lot of requests to basically do Sheldon version of you, to put an iPad up where you're motorized and put a shirt on you and stuff. They did it on Big Bang. I don't want to be derivative, so we're not going to do that. Plus, it would cost money.
Big Bang there?
Yeah,
Big Bang.
you have the shirt on. You do.
I do have the Big Bang shirt on.
You do. You are the Big Bang. So, Mel
Bazinga
Brooks.
and whatnot.
Shut up. Mel Brooks. Oh my God. Born Melvin Kaminsky. I already screwed it up.
Were you going to say Kaczynski?
I almost said Ted Kaczynski. After he blew up the
He was the
bomb.
Yo.
Mel Brooks. I was thinking about this of when it comes to humor. I don't know if it's movies altogether, but when it comes to me and what we do, I think my biggest 3 influences are, in no particular order, George Carlin, Mel Brooks, and Python.
Yeah.
That's it. Now, don't get me wrong, there are other people out there whom I find hilarious. There's some people out there who are funny, who have done horrible things, but their previous work's still pretty funny.
Yeah.
There are people out there whom I find mildly amusing. But when it comes to having a huge impact on my life and stopping what I'm doing and rewatching, it is George Carlin, it is Python, and it is Mel Brooks. What about you two?
James?
Definitely Monty Python. Mel Brooks. I mean, I think I've got all Mel Brooks movies. I love George Carlin, but I don't know if George Carlin will be my third one. I think the reason Monty Python gets me so much is the non sequitur. I love non sequitur. I love dry humor. So maybe Oscar Wilde would be my third. Just that dry, derivative, sarcastic humor. I'm sorry, Oscar Wilde wrote books. Joe, once again, they got pages. And this isn't Oscar Wilde. This
Portrait
is
of Dorian Screwface. I've
What?
got nothing.
I don't know.
I don't
Listen,
know.
your
What about your 3?
Hatred of
I'm done
Oscar
with you.
Wilde.
I'm done with you, Robot James.
Your mom's not done with me.
Well, good. She was just here a few hours ago.
A grow.
A grow.
A grow.
Yes, a grow. What about
Aggro,
you?
that's when you're playing World of Warcraft, you see, aggro is when you get attacked by a bunch of things and it attracts more creatures and you get overwhelmed.
This is our Mel Brooks episode.
I mean, honestly, I was hoping you wouldn't say all 3.
Well,
I was hoping we would differentiate, but yeah, we're pretty much on agreement on those 3.
they're the 3.
Yeah.
They were not everything each one of them did was astounding.
Yeah.
Not everything they did has merit, honestly,
Right.
but they're the penultimate, in my opinion, of comedy. I mean, there's so many other people. I know a lot of comedians will say Richard Pryor. Don't get me wrong, Richard Pryor was amazing. What's another one?
Lenny Bruce, maybe.
Lenny Bruce is another one, but those people. Now, today we're going to talk about Mel Brooks. Now, the reason I picked Blazing Saddles, I own several different Mel Brooks posters, but there's only actually 2 full one sheets. I have a half sheet if we panned over there, and we're not going to, of History of the World Part 1 underneath Star Wars. But there's only 2 that I've got hanging up, even though I own Blazing Saddles, I own Silent Movie, I think I own High Anxiety. The reason I have this one and Young Frankenstein hanging up, they both came out in 74, are because they're probably these 2 and Holy Grail, maybe the 3 best comedies ever made. I don't know. That's a big thing. That's a big tall order. But I'm telling you, when this movie's on, I stop and watch it. And I prefer Blazing Saddles just tad bit over Young Frankenstein, even though Young Frankenstein may be the superior film.
James, are you going to give your argument for PCU?
No, Chad. No, I'm not. You know what? I'm
You
not,
shy?
Chad.
You shy? You don't want to really? Shy?
No, I mean, because I think about the Mel Brooks films, and I know we're going to talk about him more, but I think all of his movies, because I do like absurd humor, I do like wordplay, and I think Monty Python had a little bit better wordplay, but when Mel Brooks was on for wordplay, he was on. When he was doing absurdist humor, it was there. I mean, the fact that the one spoken dialogue of silent film
is Marcel, right? Marcel.
Who, for those that don't know, was a famous mime.
Yes.
And what are mimes not supposed to do?
Pretend they're in a box. Yes, they're not supposed to talk. Absolutely. You sit over there and mime your way through this. There was we didn't really talk about it much of how we were going to tackle this. We could talk about Get Smart. He created Get Smart with Buck Henry.
Yep.
We could talk about him working with Sid Caesar on the Show of Shows, where he was a television writer. What'd you say?
Your Show of Shows.
Your Show of Shows. Sid Caesar, for you all that don't know that, was I'm trying to think of somebody I could compare him to today, but it probably isn't anybody I can compare him to, because Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, maybe Letterman, as far as being the notoriety and people knowing who he is. Yeah. Because at the time there were only 2 networks.
Yeah.
Right?
His show was one of the first on television. Period. And he was offered so much money. See, he and Mel Brooks wanted him to quit and go off and do movies in Hollywood. You know, right. Actually, his argument was, I'm smart, you're talented, and he, by the way, we could do a whole show on Sid Caesar and his anger management. Yeah, he almost pulled somebody out of a window one time.
Out of a cab, out of a window. He picked Mel Brooks and hung him out a window one time of a very tall building, and they were not on the ground floor when Mel Brooks bitched to him about he smoked cigars, too much smoke in there.
Yeah.
He hung him out a window and said, "Is it better now? Can you?" Yeah, I'm better.
Getting fresh air now?
Think about that. Air? He got Mel Brooks to shut up.
Right?
Yep. No one else has ever done that, I'm sure, other than probably Anne Bancroft. Now, we could talk about all this, and but they started to say, because his argument to Sid Caesar was, those things were shot on something called kinescope. For you all out there that are interested in any of the history of broadcasting. And his was like, film lasts, kinescope's not going to last. But they offered him too much money, he wouldn't go. Mel Brooks ended up out in Hollywood. And he created Get Smart, which was a successful television show with, oh my God, I completely forgot Don's name. Don Adams.
It's not.
No, it's Don Adams and Barbara Feldon as Get Smart and Agent 99. It was a huge hit back in the day with Buck Henry.
Well, and I would say it also, and talking about impact, if you're a fan of things like The Naked Gun and stuff like that, that was kind of a natural progression of what he started with Get Smart. He wasn't involved with Naked Gun.
No, but
I mean, the absurdist kind of
satirical look at looking at basically James Bond. Yeah. He picked James Bond apart before anyone else. It would be what he would do later on in most of his films.
Yeah.
And he did it before everyone else did it as well.
But it still had a lot of heart. You actually cared about Maxwell Smart.
Right. So he
missed it by
that much. And for you all, Get Smart is not just a movie with the guy from The Office. That's based on a famous television show.
That was based on Inspector Gadget.
I'm not going to talk to you now for 10 minutes.
Thanks, Chad.
Oh, and James left. So, let's get started.
Didn't take 15 years, and it was all it took was that.
Do you want to...
Damn.
He's left. James has left the building. Do you guys want to talk about the producers?
Sure. I don't think we need to. Shouldn't we talk about 12 Chairs first?
Why? Because the producers came first.
Producers came first. You're right.
So I was kind of wanting to go in chronological order.
Yeah. I'm an idiot.
Do you have the sickness of the brain?
A little bit.
Do you have a brain fever?
A little bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got the brain fever.
I got the LA flu.
LA flu. You know what that's called? Dysentery. See, you thought I was going to go another way with that, didn't you? No, sir. We're PC here at this shit show. Anyway, the producers. What was the original title of the producers, James? Do you know?
Was it Springtime for Hitler?
It was Springtime for Hitler. The whole time they were shooting us. We're not going to release it called Springtime for Hitler. Well, that's the title, by God.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, what he... as the show wound down, he was broke. He was married to Anne Bancroft. I don't think they'd had Max, his son, as yet. And he needed to make some money, and he wanted to make movies. And he got into... he couldn't figure out if the producers was going to be, basically, if it was going to be a play, or if he should do it as a novel. Somebody would say, oh, you should do it as a play, you should do it as a novel. And somebody's like, oh, no, this is a movie. So, he wrote it and finally got... the ability through an independent producer to do it. I forgot if Peter Sellers helped get it released. I don't know. Do you have that story, James?
No, that's actually one I don't know.
Okay. So he cast Zero Mostel. Zero Mostel was very big at the time. He's in a famous musical. Oh, what's it called? Something Funny Happened on the Way to the Forum. Is that it? Did I say it correctly?
Yeah. A funny thing
happened on the way to the forum. He's a famous Broadway stage actor. And then Gene Wilder was best known probably at the time for Bonnie and Clyde. He's in Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, I didn't realize. Okay.
That's by the way, I could tell you a story of how Gene Hackman ended up in Young Frankenstein.
Yeah. Oh, really? Huh.
So, the producers. What's the producers about? Who wants to take over? Because I feel like I'm doing all the talking.
No, you.
The producers is about a sham. Zero Mostel plays basically a horrible producer
who makes his money.
Yeah, who makes his money more or less by putting on shows and getting people to give him money for shows, and the money, his shows never seem to take off. And then he basically has an accountant come in that audits him, played by Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder.
And Gene Wilder comes in and is doing his books basically and doing an audit on him and does an off-the-cuff comment going, well, if you had enough insurance and certain things in place, you could make more money with a flop than you could with a success.
So it's loosely based on a guy that Mel Brooks knew when he was in New York who was doing this. He was sleeping with little old ladies to raise money for these plays, and this is all true, and... he would raise a little bit more than was needed, and somebody made a comment once, they hope to God none of these ever hit, because he produced one flop after another. The reason being is, let's say, you're sleeping with little old lady B, and you're getting 50%. You're sleeping with little old lady C, she's paying you 45%, and little old lady D is paying you 60%. Well, I just went over 100%. If the show doesn't make any money, no one ever has to get paid off. And you just made extra money, right?
Right.
It's not the first movie to deal with that. There's a French film, I think, that has dealt with it, or a French book that dealt with it before. There's definitely, I think, the first American film to deal with it. And then everybody got quiet.
Well, no, it was... basically the rest of the film is they try to find the worst possible film... the worst possible play to put on, right?
Right.
And they read one about somebody turning into a cockroach, but it's just too good.
The thing is that back to you were talking about in Python, they're all, they went to famous colleges in England. I mean, they either went to
Cambridge or Oxford.
It was either Cambridge or Oxford, all except for Gilliam. Gilliam was the only American, and he was educated. He was college educated, but the rest of them were Cambridge and Oxford. Mel Brooks has not one, but 2 Kafka jokes.
Yep.
Yeah.
2.
Yeah.
And we're also, let's give the man some credit. Should we get to what movies he produced later a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. But, I mean, we'll get to that later. As far as being educated and smart.
Oh, yeah.
Really smart. I mean, 2 Kafka jokes.
If you've never read The Metamorphosis by Kafka, read it.
I have read The Metamorphosis by Kafka.
That's what he's alluding to.
Right.
So if any of our viewers have never read The Metamorphosis, it's not too long of a read.
No, it's a short story. You should go out and check it out. The second joke is in Spaceballs. Metamorphosis. We're ready for Metamorphosis. No, Metamorphosis, yes.
Yeah.
Ready, Kafka? There's 3 people in the United States who laughed in the theaters when that came out. Right? 3.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
but anyway,
go ahead.
The rest of the producers, they finally find this horrible play written by a Nazi in hiding, because this was 1960s.
It's called Springtime for Hitler.
Called Springtime for Hitler, which is basically a musical salute to Hitler and the Nazi party.
Right.
And they decided to put on the play because, of course, there's no way this play is going to make money. It becomes a huge hit. And then there's that, oh, crap, what do we do now moment? And that's the entire plot of it.
Right. That's it. And then they're screwed and they end up in prison.
But it does have a great, a great song about, as a musical for Hitler. So you have a song called Springtime for Hitler.
Hitler and Germany. Anyway.
Winter for Poland and France.
So, he would later, of course...
Germany, Germans going to your dance.
Right. He would later adapt this to a famous stage play that won 12 Tonys.
Right.
And we'll get to the fact that Mel Brooks is one of the few people with an EGOT. Right?
Right.
So it's an Emmy,
a Golden Globe,
an Oscar, and a Tony. Yes.
Tony.
He won Best Screenplay for the producers. He never thought he would win. He prepared no speech whatsoever. He basically said, I'm going to tell you what's in my heart right now. Thump, thumpity thump, thumpity thump, thumpity thump. But he did say, I've only got so many words to thank, and it was basically to thank Gene Wilder.
Now, see, the other thing is, so the play itself was a huge success. How well did the producers do when it first got released in the theaters?
It was a huge bomb. You guys want to hear a story? It almost didn't get released. I didn't know this.
Well, and what you also got to realize, too, is this was in the 60s.
Yes.
It was about the same time frame of length as between World War II and that time as if somebody decided today to do a movie and call it like a Springtime for Osama. You know, it's kind of the same time frame.
Just slightly more, but yes, about 20-some years.
Yeah, I mean, it's close. I'm not saying it's exact, but it's about the same.
25 years. Right after, I think it came out in 68 or 69, so it would have been about 25 years after the end of World War II. So we're looking at, 17 years out?
Yeah.
So we're about 7 years out for Springtime for Osama.
Yeah.
And Afghanistan. Winter for New York. Oh, that's horrible.
No.
See? We're trying.
We're trying to get viewers.
Right. We're still not there yet. But that's
listeners.
a very good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah,
So,
the honest shock we just had would have been similar to what they would have had when he made that.
Yeah.
And people still get pissed. When the play came on, people were still mad when they went to see it because it was a huge Broadway success.
Right.
And it spawned a movie,
right,
which is also good, which also didn't do well.
Right.
I actually really like it.
Okay.
I like the movie. But it also didn't do well.
Right.
Right?
Didn't.
No, absolutely. So what do we learn from this? Don't make a movie out of the producers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I found this fascinating. I want to read this. And the major reason the film ever got released at all was due to the intervention of Peter Sellers. Because they spent very little on it. It was a low-budget film.
Yeah, it was extremely low-budget.
Somehow or another, he convinced and found his way. He has always had Final Cut. Did you guys know that? He had Final Cut on his first project. And because it was such a low budget and because he was so famous from writing television, they actually let him have it on this. After Brooks completed the picture at that point titled Springtime for Hitler, The executive producer told Brooks the film wouldn't be released because he thought it was in poor taste and not very funny. Meanwhile, while Sellers was in Hollywood making I Love You, Alice B. Talkless, which I've never seen, he liked to screen movies for him and his friends' entertainment. One night this film was screened, even though he and his friends were supposed to see this other movie. But Paul Mazursky was supposed to bring the film over, and Sellers accidentally got this one, let me get this straight. Paul Mazursky brought this one, and Sellers loved it. When he heard it would not be released, he began calling Levine, who was the executive producer, and eventually convinced him to release it. The only compromise being that the title had to be changed. That's the reason it became The Producers.
Wow.
And then he would go on to win the Oscar, which nobody thought he was going to win. He didn't think he was going to win, and he won it.
And he won the Oscar for what category?
The Producers for Best Screenplay. So, best writing.
Yeah.
Best original screenplay. All right. The next movie is 12 Chairs. Who's seen 12 Chairs? Raise your hand.
Me.
Actually, did we all watch it together?
No.
No.
Really?
I have it on the DVD.
I have it on Blu-ray, but I didn't see it. So, that's the last Mel Brooks movie I ever saw. His second movie.
Yeah, that's the last movie I saw of his as well.
Okay. 12 Chairs is about... It's hard for me. It's not my favorite.
Yeah.
It was shot in Yugoslavia. It was based on a famous Russian novel.
And it's not his usual style of movies.
It's not really either.
Well, Springtime for Hitler, it kind of... But anyway.
I didn't realize it was Frank Langella's first film.
Really?
I didn't know that, but it's Frank
Did not know
Langella's
that.
first film.
And by the way, you watch that movie, Frank Langella does not look like Frank Langella.
No, but he's still pretty good.
Yeah.
And he's still hot. Anyway, there's treasure hidden in these 12 chairs, and these two guys are no goodniks.
Right.
And they are out to try to find the 12 chairs because one of them has hidden treasure in it.
Right.
And they're trying to screw each other and everybody else they come in contact with. That it?
That's it.
That's
in
the
a nutshell.
plot. Anything to add to that?
No, I mean, no, that's the plot for the film.
Yeah.
And it seems like this is kind of like the one...
It's not bad, by the way.
It's
you go
not
out
bad.
and watch 12 Chairs.
It's
I have it on
entertaining.
Blu-ray. It's entertaining. And by the way, it probably holds up better than several other films. Well, I was about to say early 70s we have The Godfather. So not as well as The Godfather, but it holds up really well.
Yeah, it just seems like out of all the Mel Brooks movies, including, which we'll get into, Dracula Dead and Loving It and all, this one seems like it's kind of lost in the ether. Like, nobody talks about 12 Chairs for whatever reason. And I don't know if it's just because it's not typical Mel Brooks, what he
It's
became
not.
known for.
It's not. It's based on a novel, which is not also a Mel Brooks thing. He produced several movies that were based on novels.
Right.
But for him to direct a film that was done, no, it wasn't. That wasn't him.
Yeah.
And it's entertaining. It's got a dark ending, although they changed the ending. And the ending in the book, it's even darker. The other one kills the other one, slices her throat.
Oh, geez.
Yes. So he lightened that up a little bit.
As he should have.
You're right. It's a farce. It's a little dark. However, Mel Brooks has a performance in it. It's probably not one of his best performances either. So, 12 Chairs, guess what it went out and did?
Bombed.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Cut to 1973. He's got a new kid. He's married to a lady named Anne Bancroft, and the story goes he's walking down the street in New York looking for change in the grates.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And
then he found a magical golden ticket.
Oh, I've got a golden ticket. And
That did
then...
not happen.
Shut up, James.
I can't remember the producer. I'm not going to look. Said, hey, what are you doing? Well, I'm looking for change. And he took him to lunch.
Norman Steinberg?
I don't know if it was actually Norman
Andrew
Steinberg.
Bergman?
No, those are the writers.
Oh, shoot.
That's okay. I don't know who actually did it, but he took him to lunch and he said, well, I got this screenplay. It's by Andrew Bergman. Oh, really? Yeah. Did I get it? Did I move it? Need to move it back?
It looked better. There we go.
All right. Andrew Bergman had actually been a dentist, I think, and wanted to become a screenwriter. And he kind of wrote a 50-page outline, kind of a spec script. A spec script is something where they're trying to write something, but it's not completely done, or, oh, I want to try to sell this. And it was called Tex X.
Yep.
Did you guys know that?
Yeah.
And it's a play on words
Yes.
of Malcolm X, and it was the same kind of plot of a black sheriff comes into an old west town. Mel said, I don't do stuff based on other people's things. I don't do stuff on that. He goes, well, come on, we'll let you direct it, and you can figure it out. I think you'll like it. He read it and decided to do it. Yes, James.
I would say here's a little bit more details on that. It was David Begelman, by the way.
So sorry. Thank you.
Who took him to lunch. If you check out...
What'd they have for lunch?
I actually can tell you it was when he was still eating eggs, because I've heard this story more than once. There you go.
If you check out this book about Richard Pryor, it gives the backstory on a little bit of this.
And for our listeners, what is the name of that book, James?
Furious Cool, Richard Pryor and the World That Made Him.
Oh,
and it's
Furious
two
George.
authors who originally met with Richard Pryor. They were going to do a screenplay, basically kind of, if you want to think about it, Walk the Line, Johnny Cash type film about Richard Pryor. And they met with him as he was advanced and very ill.
Yeah.
And they actually were given full access to his notes, a bunch of his other stuff, and they met with a ton of people. The book's really good.
I need to read that.
It talks about Mel Brooks in it. So. And I wanted to actually talk about this because here's kind of what happened, and it's got Mel Brooks commentary on it. So Andrew Bergman was another client. Begelman was also a talent person.
Is an agent.
Yeah. In other words, he was a con artist. But Brooks, during this time, was only interested in developing his own stuff. But at the same time, as we talked about, he was not doing well. Mm-hmm. He was literally looking for change. He wasn't getting acting jobs. He had tried to just also act more. Mm-hmm. He would act in other people's stuff. And so finally, Begelman got him. And his quote when they asked him about why he finally decided to do it was, this is Mel Brooks' quote, "I figured my career was finished anyway."
Yep.
Because he couldn't get any work.
Mm-hmm.
But he hired Bergman to help him with the script, and then Norman Steinberg and Alan Unger.
Uh-huh.
And then he wanted to actually have somebody that would have, as he worded it in the interview, he knew he needed a black voice.
Right.
And he went and tried to get Dick Gregory.
Yeah.
Anybody know who Dick Gregory is?
He's a black comedian.
Yes. Who was in everything from, he only recently died, but I mean, modern day, he's probably known best for things like Reno 911. He was in some of those, but he was, and Dick Gregory allegedly read it and was like, no, this will kill my career. Why don't you get somebody else? Why you don't get somebody whose career is bulletproof?
Yeah.
And that's what made Mel Brooks go, we'll go after Richard Pryor. And if you read this book, it'll talk about why it was bulletproof and all of that stuff.
Well, they wanted to write it. He wanted to put a writer's room together to put the screenplay like he did on the Show of Shows, which is not normally. He usually writes things with someone else, maybe one or two people, but he wanted a writer's room, right, James?
Yeah, and that's so.
Richard Pryor. There you go. Of course you're breaking up on us. This is one of the more
interesting stories that doesn't get told. Richard, I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. It says your internet connection is unstable.
Which is typical James.
Oh, James.
No, actually, on my end it says I have full service.
Well, yeah, but you're willing to pay premium for gasoline.
Anyway.
So you were saying?
Richard Pryor helped write Blazing Saddles.
Well, yes, but he also had, this is actually something I didn't know until I read this book. Richard Pryor was also developing his own cowboy western about an African-American sheriff called The Black Stranger.
Oh, really?
Yes. And when Mel Brooks met with him, he looked at him and goes, listen, this has to be a surrealistic epic or we're never going to get away with it. It'll never fly. It's got to be surreal. And basically, Mel Brooks finally just told him it's got to be a Picasso painting.
Yeah.
We have to have two eyes up front. Everything's got to be out of order. And, that they worked together 9 months on it with Mel Brooks writing it, doing stuff like that. So, and he talks a lot about basically Richard Pryor doing tons of drugs and doing psychotic religious impersonations and things like that they couldn't put in the script. And Joe, did you have the research on the one thing they did cut from the film that Richard Pryor wrote that Mel Brooks went, no, we can't put that in the film?
Well, they shot it, and it is in an early screening, but I've never seen it. Yeah, it's at the end. Are you talking about the scene right after? So he goes to bed with Lily Von Stoop,
played by Madeline Kahn,
played by the amazing Madeline Kahn.
Of Clue fame,
and this is it's a stereotype joke, but the lights go out and she goes, "Is it true what they say about you people?" And you hear a zipper unzip, and she goes, "It's true, it's true." The next line that's cut from the film is, "You're sucking on my arm, baby. You're sucking on my arm."
Yeah. I don't mean to dispel you of your disillusion, man, but you're sucking
on my arm. Absolutely, that was the line that they cut out of the movie. Of all the shit that they cut out, oh my God, that's a great line.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, so oddly enough, for those people that were writing the movie, you would think that Richard Pryor wrote most of the black jokes, African American jokes. No, those are Mel Brooks. Richard Pryor wrote everything that happened with Mongo. Mongo, only pawn in Game of Life, is Richard Pryor. All those are Richard Pryor jokes.
Yeah.
So I find that hilarious.
Yeah. Isn't there a story where Richard Pryor...
The other part that I will say, the one scene that he... That Richard Pryor did write and that made him upset they didn't get an act in, what is one of my favorite scenes. It's when he takes himself hostage.
Yeah.
Drop it.
Yeah, you can't say it.
Isn't there a story? Isn't there a story that... Well, no.
But...
you have to get a word in edgewise?
Yeah, I'm not talking...
All I wanted to say was Richard Pryor and actually Mooney actually wrote that line.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing that Richard Pryor really wanted to act, because he wanted to do it full tilt Bugs Bunny off the wall.
So Richard Pryor was going to play Black Bart, and the studio wouldn't let him. Is that what you want to talk about?
No, isn't there a story when Mel Brooks first met him? He walked into the room and Richard Pryor was making Coke lines right there on the table when they first met?
Maybe, probably. I have no idea. I know that Warner Brothers would not cast him. That's how they ended up with Cleavon Little. And Richard Pryor, I don't know that he didn't forgive him, but he was never quite happy about it.
Right.
Because he wanted to play him, and he would have been great.
Right.
Cleavon Little's great. Would Richard Pryor have been better? I don't know. I love Cleavon Little in the part.
Yeah.
It's a movie. Movies can always usually have somebody else in the part. But yes, you can see that Richard Pryor would have nailed that one out. If he could have got him sober,
right,
he would have knocked it out of the park.
Right.
And that's actually what Mooney says. And if you read the book, like I said, it's a great book. If you're interested in any of this, but Mooney actually says that Richard Pryor said that Cleavon was great. But he says the problem is that Cleavon Little is great, but he's not a genius.
Yeah.
And then Mooney said, "Can you actually imagine?"
I agree.
Richard Pryor being able to do that role.
I agree.
And so yeah.
Yeah. So I did find something that was interesting. Now, most of this stuff was on IMDb. There's most of this I already knew, but other few things. Burt Gilliam, who played Lyle, who was Slim Pickens' assistant.
Oh yeah.
You and you.
Camptown Races.
He's seen this. Yeah. Okay, so he had a problem saying the N-word.
Oh.
You've seen his role, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Cleavon Little had to take him aside and said, "Listen, this is all in fun. This is joking. Please, you could go ahead and do it. We're having a good time. If I thought it was serious, I'd beat the shit out of you."
Yeah. I didn't hear that. I didn't know that story.
I didn't know that one either. The other great thing about Blazing Saddles, it has the first farting scene in film history.
Right. And that caused a lot of controversy.
A lot of controversy.
Because there's a whole story about, they thought that the N-word being used or the biracial love scenes would come. No, it was the fart scene.
The farting scene is what pissed everybody off.
Right.
Don't you all find that hilarious?
Not Richard. Mel Brooks has even said
interracial.
Sometimes
biracial.
He wonders if he let that genie out of the bottle too soon.
Well, there's a thing that you all and we all three have said. If you're going to climb the mountain, and we stole it from Mel Brooks, if you're going to climb the mountain, what? Ring the bell.
I was going to say walk over the dead bodies.
Ring the bell.
Yeah.
So, And that's another thing. When he got his, in 2015, he got his National Medal of the Arts from Barack Obama. He actually talked about Blazing Saddles, as Mel Brooks once said to his writers on Blazing Saddles, which is a great film.
Yeah.
No, that's what Barack Obama said.
I'm shaking my head.
Write anything you want, because we'll never be heard from again. We'll all be arrested for this movie. Also, did you all talk about Gig Young? Gig Young was a Western actor, and he was original.
If we're talking about Blazing Saddles, we have to talk about Gig Young.
Yeah, he was originally going to play who?
Gene Wilder's part.
The Waco Kid. Gene Wilder wanted to play the Waco Kid. I think he wanted him for another part. I can't remember if he wanted him for Headland Lamar or something else. He wanted Gene Wilder in the movie, but he didn't want him as a Waco Kid. He didn't see him as a Waco Kid.
Right.
Gig Young was a notorious drunk.
Right.
And when they went to shoot the scene that morning, what happened? James?
It was the scene where Gene Wilder falls over upside down in the bed.
Right.
In the prison, in the jail. So, James, what happens?
Telling it from Mel Brooks' point of view, Mel Brooks originally thought, oh my God, he's nailing this.
He's giving me a great performance.
He's given me a great performance because he was acting completely out of it. He was looking like he was about ready to be physically ill and all that stuff. But it turns out that, unfortunately, the reason he looked like he was giving a great performance was he was getting very, very ill. He was in bad shape.
He had the DTs.
He was foaming from his mouth.
He was foaming from his mouth. He had the DTs.
Yeah.
They had to stop filming that day. They lost a day, and then I think it was a Friday. If I'm not checked that, let me know. And Gene Wilder was there Monday morning shooting.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how it happened. There was no one else. And by the way,
you can't envision anybody else in the Waco Kid part.
I don't want to take anything. I love Cleavon Little. Cleavon Little was amazing, but I can imagine Richard Pryor in that part. I can't imagine anybody else in Waco Kid's part.
Right.
No, I literally, and I love the movie, but just his delivery of lines like, it's one of my favorite scenes. These are just simple folk, salt of the earth, blah, 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 blah. Morons.
That was improvised. That laugh Cleavon Little does is real.
Yeah.
That was real. He didn't know he was going to say that. I didn't know that either till I was looking this up. All right, we've talked a lot about Blazing Saddles.
Just one more thing before we move on. What a lot of people don't know is that Blazing Saddles was so successful, which I don't even understand with the content that was involved with Blazing Saddles, why they decided to do this. A spin-off television show was created.
That starred who, Chad?
Lou Gossett Jr.
Called Black Bart, right?
Called Black Bart.
Yeah.
Yep. You watch the pilot off. If you get certain versions of the DVD or Blu-ray, it has the pilot on. I've got a copy.
It is not good.
No.
It is not funny.
But if you're a Blazing Saddles fan, you owe it to yourself
to watch it.
It's like the Star Wars Christmas special. You owe it to yourself to go out and check that out.
Which it's right on that level.
But if
I think the Christmas special is slightly better.
Saddles, how would you take that and put it on network TV?
Yeah. I don't know. Honestly,
the other thing I want to say though is where Blazing Saddles was a success, and going back to the book, the Richard Pryor book, I mentioned he was working on his own Western. The bits that didn't make it into Blazing Saddles, he kept, and it would eventually lead to Richard Pryor being allowed to make his own Western. Has anybody ever seen it?
No.
Never even heard of it.
Adios Amigos. It is meant to be in the same vein, a little bit more serious. It's not viewed as just a comedy. It's also viewed as an action film. But obviously, he didn't get Richard Pryor again, or he didn't get Gene Wilder. So it would be the first on-screen pairing of the epic duo of Richard Pryor and Fred Williamson.
I've never seen it.
Neither have I.
Fred Williamson also directed it and reworked his screenplay. So if you're a diehard, I don't know,
Fred Williamson fan, go out and check out From Dusk Till Dawn. It's his best performance. Yeah. Not to take anything away from the man, but
if you love Blazing Saddles and you're sitting here going, Richard Pryor worked on that, and I would love to know what his other ideas were. He cooked out of his mind most of the time. So if you go and actually watch Adios Amigos, which is available on DVD, Fred Williamson is who he put in it.
Okay.
With him to do the film. So there you go.
And once again, he had Final Cut. The studio saw it, hated it. Nobody laughed, and they said, you're going to have to take out this, and this. And he said, okay, fine. Rolled it up and threw it away because he had Final Cut. They didn't know he had Final Cut. Showed it to an audience at the studio. Guess what? Of actual people, laughed their ass off. It was a big hit, so much so Warner Brothers didn't have a movie that summer. They re-released it.
Right. It was a huge success.
It was a huge success. All right. Next movie is... Can you imagine making Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein and coming out in the same year?
It's amazing, especially when you were going from looking in the gutter.
Yeah, a year ago, you were looking for change and walking and looking. I looked over at Haley for our people. I mean, because she was doing this. You were looking for change. You were married to an actress. You're a fairly successful guy, but you have no job opportunities. You've got no money. He was divorced.
Right.
I can't imagine. And then later on, you were basically setting yourself up to make movies for the next 10 to 15 years.
Right.
On top of everything else. Not even talking about the acting. We could do 6 hours on Mel Brooks. Your next movie is Young Frankenstein. And what did all those people have in common that are in that movie?
They were represented by the same agent.
Mike Medavoy. Don't ask me why I know that. They had the same agent. While they were making Blazing Saddles, Gene Wilder had the idea of writing Young Frankenstein, and he brought it up to him, and it went from there. And they were all represented by the same agent. Him, Peter Boyle, Cloris Leachman,
Terry Garr,
and well, I don't know if Terry,
Madeline Kahn,
nope,
Marty Feldman.
I forgot Marty Feldman's name. Marty Feldman started out as a writer.
Yeah,
that's what.
Well, honestly. Look at that face.
I know. He was a comedy writer for years.
Well, and if you're going to talk about Python, as we talked about, I mean, he was in the precursor to Python at last the 1948 show.
Oh, he was in more than that. He was also in the Frost Report with David Frost, who you could check out later with Frost Nixon.
You can find At Last the 1948 show on DVD, a couple episodes. But that's actually where the famous Four Yorkshiremen, he was originally one of the actors that played that. He was the writer. And he didn't want to really do a lot of stuff on screen, but he just had a presence.
Gene Wilder has said more than once before he died that it was his favorite movie of his, Young Frankenstein. He wanted to do it. It was going to be done at Columbia, and they had the deal done. And he was He was getting up to walk out of the room and said, "Oh, by the way, I don't know if this is how he tells it. I doubt that this is exactly how it happened. I'm going to shoot it in black and white." And it's like, what?
Yep.
And they wanted him to shoot it in color, and then they changed it to black and white. And he's like, no, they're just now getting color. And I'm going to say he used another country, Yugoslavia. You're going to screw me. It's going to go there and play in color.
Right.
So he had to shoot it in black and white. So it ended up at Fox by a guy named Alan Ladd Jr., who was the executive at there. He's famous for being for being a really great guy who got great talent. People called him Laddie. His friends called him Laddie. There was a little movie he said yes to that was a huge film that got his ass fired. You guys know what movie that was?
No.
Star Wars.
Oh.
Because he failed to nail down the sequel rights to that bitch.
But everybody was so excited about Damnation Alley.
Yeah,
Damnation Alley was supposed to be the big hit.
I know. 20th Century Fox, he eventually got him fired. He produced Blade Runner, too. Laddie. Anyway, Alan Ladd Jr., the Ladd Company. And Mel Brooks ended up doing a lot of movies for Fox. Young Frankenstein, what did we not cover in the last episode? We talked about it quite a bit, didn't we?
Yeah, we talked about it in length. So, I mean, we covered quite a bit of it.
The only interesting fact I'd like to throw out there is Gene Hackman plays the blind man, which is a play on one of the scenes from one of the Frankenstein movies. And how that happened is that Gene Hackman wanted to do more comedy. And I guess they were friends from when they did Bonnie and Clyde together, but he and Gene Wilder were tennis friends. They played tennis every week.
Yeah.
That was it.
Well, the other thing, too, is about Young Frankenstein maybe we should cover is the fact that this is probably the only one where Mel Brooks doesn't have a speaking role in it.
Well, he has a speaking role. He's not
he's the door handle, right?
No. He also was the voice of Frankenstein when you can hear him, when he's hearing the Frankenstein voice. Yes.
Okay.
And he's also the voice of the cat. That's right. And the Frau Blucher. He's actually several different voices. Gene Wilder did not want him in the movie.
Oh, really? Why?
because he said it would just take everybody out of it.
Oh, okay.
It was not for this, and he wouldn't let him direct it until he said he would not be in.
But his face is in it because his sculpture is on the castle itself.
And he has several different voice cameos in it too. So,
okay.
But that's beside the point. I don't blame him. I put myself in everything too. I forgot what I was going to say.
So, again, Young Frankenstein was a huge success, and then he goes in to producers and says, okay, so here's my next movie. There's not going to be any audio.
By the way, I didn't know this. Mel Brooks considers the best film he ever directed to be Young Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But it's not the funniest.
What's the funniest?
Blazing Saddles and the Producers. It's number 3 on his funniest. The Blazing Saddles and the Producers are funnier.
Huh.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can argue with it. Silent movie. Yeah.
Which, okay, so out of the three of us...
That's more of your favorite
That's one. I love...
And it has a ton of cameos.
I love Young Frankenstein. I love Blazing Saddles. I do. But Silent Movie has a special part of me that I just love it. And I will watch it every time. If it's on, I will stop doing what I'm doing and watch it.
Which is really disadvantageous. It was not advantageous for your children that day they were playing with the fire.
Blame programming.
Mistakes were made.
Yeah.
But no, Silent Movie is a great film for me. And
who are the 3 stars?
Mel Brooks, Marty Feldman, and a very young, bald Dom DeLuise.
Dom DeLuise. I watched him in Amazing Stories the other night, directed by Burt Reynolds, and
oh really?
Yeah, I want to do a whole episode on Amazing Stories, but that's beside the point. I
want to do an entire episode about Dom DeLuise.
Ooh, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do Loose Cannons.
Oh my God, that's directed by Bob Clark.
Yeah, and stars Gene Hackman.
Yep, absolutely. And Dan Aykroyd.
All right.
The James Thomas of Aykroyd.
Look forward to our future episode on Dom DeLuise.
And all these other people. So what else do you want to say about it? It was actually, you know what? I looked it up. I didn't realize it was a success.
It was a huge success.
Yeah. Most of his movies were successes up until the 80s.
Right.
Yeah. So I didn't know it was a success. It has a ton of cameos in it. Burt Reynolds, Paul Newman. I could just sit here and go off.
Yeah, Liza Minnelli.
Right.
It goes on and on.
Anything to add about Silent Movie?
No, I mean...
Took balls of steel to make a silent movie, and they let him do it.
You go from black and white. You go. Well, let's start. You go from Blazing Saddles, which,
probably at the time the most vulgar movie ever made.
How did that even get made? I mean, my God, they farted on screen.
They would never get made today. Not the farting. The rest.
The rest of the stuff would never get made today. Black and white movie in the age of color. It's just like everything's it has to be color. And then
and there are people who don't have who don't have color television sets in '74.
Right.
Like that's a premium.
That's a premium.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, when you go to the movie, when you have when you can't afford a television, you go to the movies to see color because it's out there now. And then you go back, and then you're watching a movie in black and white. Still, a lot of people want to see it. Then you follow that up with a movie with no dialogue.
Yep. And the only person who speaks is a mime who never spoke before on film.
And he says, no. Sorry, spoiler.
Oh my God, you ruined it for me. I'm not going to watch this shit. All right. So, anything else? You want to add anything else, James? We're good? High Anxiety. He made fun of the master.
And let's talk about him making fun of the master in real life.
Hitchcock.
The man had a pacemaker. He was not in good health. What does Mel Brooks do? Sees Alfred Hitchcock bend over, kicks him in the ass.
And Hitchcock loved it. One of the best stories. James, you want to talk about him going out to dinner?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories about him.
Yeah.
And by the way, James Thomas will not do it any justice. Please go look the Mel Brooks special up and let him tell the story.
Just give us a quick version.
He does tell it best. I'll tell it real quick, though. Basically, Mel Brooks and Hitchcock end up at dinner together, whatever. He tells the full backstory. Watch him do it. But they sit there, and it begins with it's a 4-course meal. We're talking desserts and all that stuff, and
he has shrimp cocktails, salad, steak.
Yeah, and Mel Brooks he's literally almost becoming ill, just trying to keep up with Alfred Hitchcock, and at the very end, the waiter, of course, comes over.
He isn't doing it justice.
Pretty much was Alfred Hitchcock's personal waiter at this establishment, comes over and says, "Will there be anything else, Mr. Hitchcock?" And he just goes, "Again."
Yes, he took his cigar out of his pocket, cut it,
beginning.
Put it back into the case, put it back, and said, "Again." And then he did it all again.
From the beginning.
From the beginning.
The full meal all over again.
But if you've never seen it, it's another one. It's got a great performance, another great Cloris Leachman performance in it. The future director of Rain Man and Diner, Barry Levinson, is in it. He's the one that stabs Mel Brooks with the paper in the movie. He was a comedy writer. He started out as a comedy writer.
He did a comedy troupe with Craig T. Nelson, right?
Yes, that's right. I didn't know that till we found that out researching something else, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a whole story where I'll tell this real quick. Craig T. Nelson and Barry Levinson, they were a comedy duo way back when, and one of their bits was they would be on stage and they would be tuning their guitar, and that tuning would take 15 minutes. Of just them tuning the guitar over and over again.
Hilarious.
So they would make the audience would laugh.
Another.
So the audience would laugh. They would start chuckling nervously. They would get really irritated, and then bring them right back again.
Yep.
That was one of the things they were known for. Continue.
So Hitch, there's a lot of great performances. Check it out. He made fun of all the most of the Hitchcock films. Psycho, there's a great sequence where he makes fun. And actually, Hitchcock corrected him. He's like, I don't remember. There was one mistake in your shower sequence. There was 9 shower rings. You had 8.
Wow.
And he literally was one off, and Hitch caught it.
Uh-huh.
But he loved it so much. This is the story I'm going to tell. He says he showed it for him before it came out in the private theater. Hitch sat there. He left. People who were friends with him, I'm not. He was dead. Called him Hitch. Left. He didn't say anything. And Mel was like, "Oh, did he hate it? Whatever." And he sent him over a whole case of Dom Perignon Magnums, and said, "I loved it," but he never told him.
Wow.
He just sent it in a note. He walked out of it. Loved it. So he was a huge fan. There was one, did you all look at this, the joke that he wanted in the movie, but he never got to put it in there, that Hitch wanted in the movie?
No.
And there's a guy, because Hitchcock wanted to do it in one of his movies and it never quite fit, because Hitchcock was a funny guy. He's also maybe a little bit touchy to starlets as well. It came out. There's some really good stories and a good movie about it. Check it out. Even though he's still a genius when it comes to celluloid. There's a guy, he's running. Their cops are after him. He sees the boat. The boat's about to take off. He sees the boat's out in the water. He's running. He jumps for the boat, lands on the boat as the boat's docking.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
I know, it's hilarious, right? High Anxiety, and it has a great song in it. Once again, Mel Brooks writing songs for his movies. Anything else?
Well, do you know the we talked about with Young Frankenstein when we did the Frankenstein episode that they use the actual sets. Do you know what Mel Brooks used actually from Hitchcock that shows up in this film?
No.
He actually went out and hired the same bird trainer that Hitchcock used on the birds.
Really?
Oh,
wow. He said that it was important that they kept the birds managed the same way. And not to give anything away in the film, there's a scene that has some bird droppings and all of this stuff.
He gets shit on by birds.
Well, and they actually hired a helicopter to do that.
Mm-hmm. To
just spray, basically, and it was made from mayonnaise and ground up spinach.
Yeah.
The fake bird dropping. The problem was that while they were setting all this up and getting the helicopter ready and doing all that stuff, some birds had evidently settled near the set as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when the helicopter took off, it scared the birds too. So there's some of that is not fake.
No, he really got shit on by the birds.
Yeah.
He got they got scared. But yes, so it does actually use the same bird trainer as Hitchcock used in the birds. So again, actual films.
It's funny.
That was the best pause I've ever seen.
History of the World Part 1. 2 facts. 1, the Vestal Virgins are all played by Playboy Playmates.
Nice.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
And I didn't know Richard Pryor was once again going to be Gregory Hines' part.
You know, honestly, I can see that because I feel like Gregory Hines does not fit into that.
That's
movie.
his first movie. What'd you say?
Gene Wilder was going to be in High Anxiety as well, and couldn't do it because of time conflict.
Time conflicts, absolutely. Orson Welles is a narrator. Can I tell you this really quick story about Orson Welles? So I will do a whole episode where we will hopefully do a whole episode on Orson Welles eventually.
Yeah, we need to.
He is one of my favorite.
Except you hate Touch of Evil.
It was agreed that Orson Welles would receive $5,000 per day, which is a hefty sum now, much less then, in exchange for his services. Figuring they'd have to spend 5 or 8 hours, 5 8-hour days recording and re-recording these lines of Welles, Mel Brooks paid him $25,000 up front, and they were all okay with that, right?
Yeah.
All right. By noon on the first day, Welles had nailed every single line to perfection. Oh my God, I could have paid you $5,000 instead of $25,000. Brooks lamented. After kicking himself for a few minutes, the funny man asked Welles how he planned to spend the bounty. Cuban cigars and Saruva's caviar. As he walked out the door. Just letting you all know that. History of the World Part 1 was his most expensive movie to that time. The most expensive movie would be Spaceballs later on.
Yeah.
He actually split the cost with whatever studio was. He paid for half and they paid for half, and he actually ended up doing fairly well out of it. It's not a great movie.
No.
But I enjoyed it.
It's got so many great scenes.
It's got a lot of great scenes in it. It's got one of the best, the most expensive. They spent $1 million on the set for which famous, do you guys want to guess which one it is? The Inquisition. What a show. $1 million he spent on that set.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
How poor are the Christians?
Shit, I forgot the line.
He forgot the line.
They've only got one God.
Yeah, they've only got one God.
They can only afford
poor.
one God.
They
Yeah,
only have one God.
Yeah, History of the World Part 1.
It's funny.
Sorry,
it's funny.
Really quick.
He's a stand-up philosopher.
How does the Roman Senate vote on the poor? F the poor. It's got a lot of great lines.
And of course, Jews from space.
Jews in space.
Jews in space.
Jews in space. The Inquisition, I didn't realize because I always think of it as such a hilarious thing, but it once again got him in trouble with rabbis in the Jewish and a lot of people in the Jewish community.
Really?
Yeah, they were still pissed about it several hundred years later, I suppose, for probably good reason, and they did not take kindly to him making light of it and having a whole dance number. He got a lot of hate mail about it, actually.
But, I mean, that's kind of been, obviously not to the extent that Richard Pryor did it, but hasn't Mel Brooks' entire thing, I mean, he appeared not too long ago on Jimmy Kimmel or one of them and took a comb and did the...
He does it all the time. The Hitler. Yeah, he says his argument was because he got a lot of hate mail for Springtime for Hitler and the producers too. And a lot of people argued with him. And his point was always, and he said this to mainly a lot of rabbis, you can't defeat him with just fighting him. You have to make him into a buffoon. You have to make Hitler into a buffoon. You have to belittle him and make the man less than.
Yeah.
You have to, that's how you defeat him. Make him into an idiot, a buffoon. And I kind of understand that. In interest of time, let's move on. There's a big gap there. He's in several movies. There's one that's a remake that he acted in. He produced, but he didn't direct, so I left it off my list. But the next one is Spaceballs. Now, Spaceballs was actually his most expensive movie ever. And was not a huge hit when it came out.
Oh, but really? I thought it was a huge hit.
It was not a huge hit. However, to this day, what makes him the most money?
Spaceballs. Because
the DVD, Blu-ray, and everyone, people love Spaceballs.
And George Lucas was like all on board with this.
George Lucas let him use everything, didn't mind a bit. The only thing he couldn't do was license anything. Thus, all the humor in the movie come from where the real money from the movie's made. Most of that was jokes of him having conversations with Lucas, who let him do whatever he wanted, as long as he didn't license anything.
Right. And if
does that make more sense?
Yeah,
though? Now it's hilarious. So, and George Lucas loved it. And actually, the compliment Lucas gave him after the movie was this would work even if it wasn't a Star Wars parody.
Right. No, I completely agree.
Yeah, he said it would work if it wasn't a Star Wars parody. He loved it. But
Spaceballs was my introduction to Mel Brooks.
It's all Blazing Saddles. It was not a huge failure, Chad, but it wasn't a huge success. It did okay.
I thought it was a massive success.
Did okay. I saw it in the theater. Did you guys see it in the theater when you were that young?
Nope.
Okay. I loved it. Of course, I love Star Wars, and I loved Mel Brooks. I love this. I remember watching this as a kid, laughing my ass off, which I probably shouldn't have been allowed to watch.
Yeah, I didn't watch that till I was a teenager. Spaceballs was my introduction to Mel Brooks and what made me love Mel Brooks, and I watched it repeatedly.
Absolutely. Yeah. You want to hear a couple of things? By the way, it's also Elon Musk's one of his favorite movies.
Good for him.
Did you know there's ludicrous speed on the? If you have to find it, it's one of the special apps on the Teslas.
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, they have different ones. It's like ludicrous speed, Gone to Plaid. All these things are all in there.
Huh.
And actually, if you go listen to the Joe Rogan interview, he talks about yogurt, and he starts quoting him.
Jeez.
Yep, Elon Musk. Spaceballs. One of my. Oh, by the way, the lunchbox and the coloring book in it, those are Transformers.
Are you serious?
Yeah, they just put Spaceballs over it. If you go back and look, it's clearly a Transformers coloring book.
Oh man, now I gotta go watch it.
That's all it is.
Wow.
I know. Yeah. And James Caan was going to play Lone Star, but had addiction issues.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys know that?
No.
I didn't.
Bill Pullman was never his choice on anything. He also wanted Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise and couldn't get them.
For Lone Star?
Lone Star. Bill Pullman was his last he saw him in a movie called, and if you guys get to this is a Abrams Zucker film called Ruthless People. And
I love Ruthless People.
It's a great movie about horrible people. It's it's probably what we should have done more of with Murder Virgin.
Yeah.
If we could have got that tone a little bit better with Murder Virgin, maybe it'd be a little more successful. But that's on us.
The speaking of merchandising,
yeah,
one of the scenes that a lot of people remember from Spaceballs was actually more or less improvised. The one where Darth Helmet is playing with the toys.
That was all improvised by Rick Moranis.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Mel Brooks had said, "Oh, well, maybe you should be playing with toys or something when they come in," and Rick Moranis just made all that up on the spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, that was all Rick Moranis. So again, I think the other side of it is. The ability that Mel Brooks has to do allusions and homages. I mean, Spaceballs has the exact same actor from Alien.
Well, John Hurt plays Jesus in History of the World Part 1 in a wonderful sight gag but anyway, and the funny thing about that, and I'll talk a little bit about it. So Mel Brooks produced The Elephant Man, which is one of John Hurt's best roles.
Right.
And it's probably I don't know, it's a great David Lynch film. It's a great movie.
It's the best David Lynch movie.
I don't know about that.
Yes.
I love Blue Velvet. Anyway, but it's a great movie. You should go out and see it if you've never watched it. And it's not in any way, shape, or form historically accurate.
No, it's completely inaccurate.
But Mel Brooks,
as most biofilms are.
Mel Brooks produced that movie and picked David Lynch to do it.
Right.
And who would think that or who would know that unless you were into it? So, and by the way, later on, David Lynch thanked him at his something, right? He went on stage and said, I still don't know to this day why he picked me, but thank you. Anyway, I forgot where I was going with that. John Hurt thought that Mel Brooks lied to him and said, no, it's just you show up and do it. And then he got there, and then he realized they were going to rip the whole thing out of his chest. And then he was going to have to be on that table and do all that over again for a cameo he didn't even get paid for. As a favor to Mel Brooks.
And they didn't talk again.
I don't know if that's true.
I'm sure it's not.
But I can imagine us doing that to each other.
Yep.
And what was he going to do? Say no once he showed up? You guys good with Spaceballs?
The only other thing I was going to say, John Candy being cast was also because of Rick Moranis.
Yeah. And originally he was going to have a full face.
Oh, really?
And they cut off all the prosthetics and he made him take them away. He's like, well, shit, if I'm going to pay John Candy, I want to see John Candy. Because he was a producer on all these things for the most part.
Sense, yeah.
Mel Brooks was also the producer of most of his movies.
Right.
All right.
But the last thing I will say, that Barf was one of the more complex costumes that Mel Brooks ever had to deal with.
I'm sure.
It took 3 people to control Barf's costume. There's a remote control for one ear, a remote control for another ear, and the tail was a separate system.
So
there you go. 3 people to make Barf come to life.
We're running a little long, so let's go through the rest of these. I don't want to go as quickly as possible, but Life Stinks was a huge disaster, and I bet most of you out there don't even know that Mel Brooks starred and wrote and directed a movie called Life Stinks.
Which I enjoy.
I don't enjoy it. I rewatched it last year. It's not terrible.
Right.
But it by no means is memorable.
Right.
And it's one of his favorites, according to one of his interviews.
I think that's right. Yeah.
But it's not an original idea. It's not a satire. It's about a guy who's a billionaire who makes a bet to live on the streets, right? And then his lawyers screw him, and he has to fight to get his money back.
Right.
Did I miss anything?
No.
It's got a couple of good sight gags in it. It's got Leslie, I forgot her name, Howard Morris, who's another Mel Brooks regular, who you would know as Ernest T. Bass from the Andy Griffith Show. But that's the story. It was a disaster. No one watched it, and it was a huge bomb.
Right.
Have you ever seen it, James?
Yeah. I mean, it's not my favorite film he did.
It's not terrible, but it is a completely forgotten Mel Brooks film. I think it may be more forgotten than 12 Chairs, or right on the same level.
It's on the same level.
Yeah.
But there's that, the scene where he's trying to, like, make love to the woman, and there's just layer upon layer.
Layer. Leslie, I can't remember her last name.
I can't remember.
He followed that up with where I'm going to say, people say that Life Stinks is where he went. I'm going to say it's the next one. Because at least Life Stinks is different. Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to defend Robin Hood Men in Tights this much.
It's not a terrible movie, and it has some great scenes in it, and it's got a lot of funny humor. But
And what I'm going to say is, I rewatched it because I watched it when it came out.
I did too.
It's probably the first one I saw of his in theaters.
I saw it in London, Kentucky with my mother.
And the reason this came out is because of the success of Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Right, and somebody said, I'm sure, why don't you do Robin Hood?
And he was revisiting something that he had worked on before. He had previously worked on a show called When Things Were Rotten, which was a lampooning. It was basically the Get Smart of the Robin Hood stuff. And he was revisiting. What I will say about Robin Hood Men in Tights, and where I'll defend it a little bit, is I rewatched it not too long ago, and I realized if it would have been the last film he made, which it's not, luckily, but it constantly alludes to his other movies.
It does.
I mean, it's got young Dave Chappelle.
It's Dave Chappelle's,
at the very end of it.
It's Dave Chappelle's first major role.
Right.
And at
As
the
I chew.
At the very end of it, he there's a line where the sheriff of Nottingham has lost his job, whatever, and they say, well, a chew or whatever. Yeah, a chew should be the sheriff. A black sheriff. And literally, Dave Chappelle's line is, what worked in Blazing Saddles.
The hangman is the same hangman.
Right.
The guy that's the hangman is the same hangman from Blazing Saddles.
Well, and the Men in Tights song is literally to the same beat, same chords as Jews in Space. I mean, if you're a Mel Brooks fan, the Good to Be King line.
Yep.
I also love Richard Lewis. So Richard Lewis, I don't know, I find him hilarious. So
I like Tracy Ullman.
Tracy Ullman's like one of the best parts about that movie.
And she's funny too. And Carrie Elwes is good in it.
Yes.
He's probably is a better Robin Hood than the other Robin Hood.
Some Robin Hoods.
I can speak
in a British accent.
Yeah. It has some great lines. There's that, and then there's Dracula Dead and Loving It. Robin Hood Men in Tights was a fairly successful film, and then he went on to make Dracula Dead and Loving It, which was his last movie, and it was a bomb too. I mentioned that because of Steven Weber's in Dracula Dead and Loving It. And I saw an interview with him talking about it, and it was one of his great achievements in life was to work with Mel Brooks and be in a Mel Brooks film. He just wished he'd have been in a Mel Brooks film in the 70s. And his point was, and it wasn't derogatory in any way, shape, or form, but he was talking about it as in relation to Dracula Dead and loving it, I felt like I was in the Mad Magazine version of a Mel Brooks film.
That makes sense.
And I thought that was perfect, and I thought he nailed it. However, I feel Dracula is funnier than Robin Hood Men in Tights.
I agree. For two reasons. And
Even
James,
though it was the bomb.
And for two reasons here. And James, I'm going to steal your thunder here, but you're going to agree. Two things. One, the kill scene with the blood.
Well, yes.
And Peter McNichol.
Peter McNichol. And the kill scene with the blood, that line at the end goes, yeah, and where that's ad lib.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's saying that to Mel Brooks.
I didn't know that. Didn't know that was an ad lib.
But also, he says Life Stinks is his favorite, maybe his favorite movie, and he'll never do anything funnier than the kill scene in Dracula Dead.
Loving it.
I have that interview where he said there's never and nothing I've ever did funnier than that.
Yeah. James, what were you going to say about Peter McNichol?
No, Peter McNichol is wrong me. All that is great. The one thing that
yeah, he didn't tell him it'd be 200 gallons.
That deserves probably a little bit of attention is why my kids know the voice of Mel Brooks so well. He plays Vlad in Hotel Transylvania.
Hotel Transylvania, yeah.
Well, no, I was going to mention that briefly about the fact that Mel Brooks still lives on in movies by doing a lot of voiceover work. As in Hotel Transylvania 3, he was in a lesser-known animated movie film called Robots. He's in a ballerina movie called Leap.
He never stopped acting. He won an Emmy on doing Mad About You.
Right.
I was going to say, well, and his other claim to fame, at least, and I know nobody else enjoys these movies but me, and actually I only enjoy one of them, but his, I guess, Italian protege, Ezio Greggio,
who's
of the Hams, which I like because it's Dom DeLuise and it's stupid humor.
It's a terrible
movie.
movie.
It's got cameos by John Carpenter, Joe Dante, Mel Brooks is in it. Literally, John Aston. It's just got great cameo appearances and stuff like that. But they also did a movie together called Screw Loose, which don't go fine, but is, I mean, because Ezio Greggio was the Italian protege of Mel Brooks, and they did a couple movies together. So there is that.
He's in He's in Men in Tights. I didn't know that until I was looking it up, but he's also in Men in Tights. And by the way, the line that Steven Weber says, "She's dead enough," was ad-libbed because it was really to Mel Brooks, not knowing that there was going to be that much blood. She's dead enough. Yeah. Was ad-libbed.
But I guess before we wrap...
And that's Leslie Nielsen, really quick. Yeah. And probably not a good job of casting, but I do think it's superior to Men in Tights.
I agree with you on that, by far.
Because of Peter McNichol and that scene. You're right. Peter McNichol...
He owns that movie.
He owns it.
Yeah.
Every scene.
Best Renfield ever. Sorry, Tom Waits.
You're going to go with Tom Waits? You're not going to go with the actual...
Nope.
All right.
Tom Waits.
I know we've got to wrap up, but I wanted to tell one story that I found from an interview from when High Anxiety came out.
This is going to be a story
that's
by James. So I read it to my daughter the other day. Go ahead.
So when High Anxiety came out, there used to be an author for Rolling Stone who did this weekly thing as Charles Young, and he basically did, we would now consider it kind of clickbait type articles where it was like 7 revelations about whatever.
Right.
And he did one with Mel Brooks, and the story was that he was waiting for Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks said, I'll let you do it. I'll meet you at the Russia Tea House, blah, 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 blah. The deal is you can't ask me about my wife, my kids, or money. Mm-hmm. And he said, he says in the interview, he says, that would be the same requirements I'd make. So I go to meet Mel Brooks. He goes, I'm waiting for Mel Brooks, and Mel Brooks is late, and this cab pulls up. And 2 people get out of the cab, and I'm like, oh, crap. It's John Lennon and Yoko Ono, who hadn't done a lot of stuff publicly around that time. And he says, I'm thinking I can grab them and just get a soundbite or something. And at that time, Mel Brooks pulls up, and he says, I had to make the choice. Do I chase John Lennon and Yoko Ono, or do I go meet with Mel Brooks? And he goes, obviously I ended up meeting with Mel Brooks, because if I was going to be interviewed by somebody and they ran off after somebody else, I'd say screw it. The funny part about that was they were asking Mel Brooks. He said, Mel Brooks, a lot of people have said that you might actually be crazy. And he goes, that's absolutely not true. He goes, I've seen a psychologist several times. I am one of the most rational people around. I have documentation to prove it. And he talked a few more minutes, and he said, you can actually contact my psychologist. Here it is, blah, 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 blah. And long story short, they ended up actually talking to the psychologist, and he said, yeah, Mel Brooks is perfectly rational, but I actually did say that he was completely and utterly sane, but I pulled back my comment after I gave it. And Mel Brooks went back to him and he said, did he tell you what I did? He said, Mel Brooks, basically what Mel Brooks, once he got the psychologist to say that he was perfectly normal.
You broke up, bro.
Waited in the lobby. Oh, man. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, finish this damn story.
By the way,
Mel
you could have
Brooks
left off the whole John Lennon part.
Mel Brooks waited in the lobby until he saw the doctor come around the corner to go to the restroom.
Yes.
When the guy went inside the restroom, Mel Brooks walked in and urinated on his shoe.
Okay.
And he said, that'll teach you to tell people that I'm completely and utterly sane, and walked out.
All right, then. One thing
that was the one Mel Brooks story I found that I had never heard before.
If you're a fan of Mel Brooks, a few things I want you to tell you about. Not only did he produce Elephant Man, he also produced the great The Fly and a few other films as well. We could have talked about Carl Reiner and he and the 2,000-Year-Old Man for an hour. And there are a ton of TV, movie things. What Chad wanted to mention is a great, what'd you say?
There's a kid's book that they wrote together not too long ago called Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner.
Yeah.
The 1,000-Year-Old Man Goes to School.
Yeah.
The 10,000-Year-Old Man.
The 2,000-Year-Old Man, but that's beside the point. Anyway, moving right along. Really quick, there's one of Chad and I's favorite films, and it's based on a loose story of him working on the show of shows, and he produced the movie. He didn't direct it, didn't do anything else in it. It stars Peter O'Toole. What's it called?
That's the reason why I wrote Peter O'Toole movie, because I'm blanking on the title.
Oh, it's called My Favorite Year, and it's directed by Richard Benjamin. I Got You Back.
Thank you.
And it's directed, and it's about him working as a young man on the show of shows. And do you know who
it's not Errol Flynn.
It's not?
No, there's an interview with Mel Brooks says it's not Errol Flynn. It's a Spanish actor, and he never did say his name.
Are we wrong? Because the thing was, for years it was based on Errol Flynn.
There's an interview with Mel Brooks. I forget which one it was. I think it might have been Dick Cavett. It might have been Dick Cavett. I think it was Dick Cavett, where he just said that, people think it's Errol Flynn. It's not. It was a Spanish actor and then he never told us his name.
It's his name is Benji. He's loosely based on Mel Brooks in that time. I don't know that you ever seen. I own the original one sheet because It's one of my favorite movies. But it is directed by Richard Benjamin. Go out and check it out. It's called My Favorite Year, and it's one of the great Peter O'Toole performances. Yeah. By the way, when I tell you that Peter O'Toole is one of the greatest actors of all time, and I say that's one of his great performances, right up there with A Lion in Winter, you should check that shit out, because I mean it.
And also, My Favorite Year,
by the way, My Favorite Year is not as good as A Lion in Winter, but go ahead.
The host and producer of the show is insane, quick to anger, wants to fight the mob. That is Sid Caesar.
All that's true. We need to do a whole episode on Sid Caesar and some stories about that. Yeah. Because I'm sure the kids out there want to watch it. James, you good? We're good?
Yeah. I was just actually looking up some more trivia about My Favorite Year, and one of the lines that they do actually pulling from actual history, Mel Brooks, while it's loosely based on a couple different people, they also did have him actually quote John Barrymore a couple times in the script. And if you don't know anything about John Barrymore's life, he also was a notorious drunk.
And he's Drew Barrymore's grandfather. And thank you all so much. What we need you to do from this point on is watch the show or listen to the show. And then when you do that, we need you to share it on your social medias, like your Twitters, your Facebooks, your Instagrams. And we need you to go on the iTunes and the SoundClouds and the YouTubies and subscribe.
Right. And rank us.
Rank us and tell us that we don't suck. This has been...
Or do you think we do? We'll take honesty as long as you subscribe.
Please subscribe. Thank you so much, and share us on your social media. This is Bonehead. Have a great day. Thank you, Mel Brooks, for making my life just a little bit better. That was way too serious.
Yeah. You ended on a downer.
I don't know. It did. All those people, they made my life richer. And as much as I give shit to Lucas made my life richer. Which is sad, because really love and family should have taken care of that. So, thanks, family.
Are we going to end this like Dracula did in Loving It, where we each try to get the last word?
No.
No.
Nah.
Nah.
No.
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 Yeah, no, I disagree
She's
with all that.
dead enough!
Disagree.
Meh.
Yeah.